Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today we're going to be painting and creating this whimsical style snowman. I'm going to walk you through the steps of how you can make your little snowman a little bit more dimensional by adding some shading on his body to give that more of a contour look. I'm also going to show you how you can create this whimsical style tree and get those beautiful little watercolor blends very easily. And we're also going to be using some salt all the way around the edges to create that little bit of magical snow dust. Well, let's get started. I'm going to show you some of the materials I used to create this whimsical style snowman painting. To begin with, let's go over quickly some of the materials I'm going to be using today. The watercolor paper I'm going to be using is the 140-pound Canson brand watercolor paper. I've used this for a long time. I get nice results by using this paper. We're going to be working on this snowman, and I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the tracers for any of the drawings that I do, or paintings I do on my channel. And then they get the black and white tracers so they can go ahead and trace it and then paint. And then they also get the color chart swatch of all the colors that I used. And this time around, since it's my birthday week, they're also going to get an additional painting inside of my sketchbook membership. It's a great way, if drawing is not your thing, I can do the drawing, then you can go ahead and trace and paint right along with me. The colors I'm going to be using today, or the paints that I'll be using, is the Paul Rubens paints, but just use what you might have. I'm going to be taping down my paper first using some Scotch brand magic tape. I always put this tape on my clothing first before I tape around my paper so I don't have a less chance of ripping up my paper. Well, that's just some of the beginning steps, and we'll go right on in to the painting. The first step I'm going to do is add a little bit of shadowing and contouring to my white snowman. I'm going to be using the colors Prussian Blue and Payne's Gray. These colors are mixed to no more than tea consistency. I want this to be fairly light so I can add those little shades of blue with not adding too much color. I still want it to feel like it's a frosty snowman, so by adding these double shades of blue, I can add additional shadowing. I'm using the light blue mostly on that face. If I need a darker shade of blue, that's when I'm going to pop in that Payne's Gray over the top. You can always rinse your brush off with your water and add clean water to that, and then tickle those edges slightly with clean water to soften your shadows so you don't get any harsh lines. You can see me adding that little bit of water there to soften those lines. Watercolor is always going to dry a little lighter, so what we're seeing now won't be exactly what it's going to look like when it's dry. Before I do any more work on my snowman, I need to let those blue areas dry so my colors don't blend all together. I'm going to bump over and start doing my Christmas tree next. Now I have 3 different colors that I'm using on my tree, a light, a medium, and a blue-green color. What I want to do first is paint in just plain water. I want to go around my ornaments and just stay on the tree part. Wherever the water is, that's where your watercolor wants to flow. And I want my ornaments to stay white so I can make them more of a bright color in the end. I started at the bottom with my lightest shade of green, tree green, then bumped up and did more of a blue-green called emerald green. Those colors are all wet, and I'm moving down into the middle, and I'm going to be using Hooker's Green. I want to paint the middle, but I'm also going to touch into the opposite colors. So I'm going to take my Hooker's Green, touch it into that blue-green, and touch it into the tree green down below. And by doing that, my colors are going to slightly blend and do that little bit of watercolor magic, I like to say, where it's a wet on wet color blend. I also want to take a little bit more paint that has some more pigment in it and a little less water, and I'm going to use that to paint the edges of my tree and around the baubles. By having that little bit of darker pigmented color, it's going to draw it into the water, and I'm going to get more of a contour look and a natural shadowing. This is a great way to add just a tiny bit of contour lines and shadowing without not having to do a lot of work to create them. Now that the blues have dried pretty much on my snowman, I can go ahead and add some more details. I'm going to be painting his nose an orange color called Indian Yellow. I'm using just the tip of my brush and putting in the color. It's mixed a little bit stronger pigmented because I want to have a little bit more control, and I want to make sure my orange just stays right in that area. I'm going to have more pigment and less water so I can control my color just a little bit more. For the scarf, I'm going to be using the color Cad Red, and Cad Red does dry slightly lighter, so I know I'm going to have to add another layer on top of this. In the end, I want that front part of his scarf to be the lightest shade of the red, and I definitely want to have a shadow between the two layers of the scarf so that it looks like there's two different pieces of fabric there. I also want to make sure I have a dark area off to the edges of my scarf. That's going to give it that contour feeling. And on those earmuffs, I want the same thing. I'm going to have just more of a medium shade of red in the middle, but I want to add a darker shadow on the edges to give it more of a contour. That's really just going to bring this little piece to life by adding these little subtle layers of shadow. You may not get it all done on this layer. You probably have to wait for it to dry and add an additional layer. Now for the star, I just chose a brightish yellow and popped that in. I'm going to be working on the background now, and I'm going to be going around just that thin little outside layer. I have a lot of white paper in the middle, so I can go ahead and work on that now, even though the star is probably still wet, my red is still wet. Because I'm leaving a white border on in the inside, I can work on this little area. I'm going to be using the colors Permanent Violet, a little bit of Prussian Blue, and some Payne's Gray. I wanted to add water first and then layer in my colors. I want this to be a nice juicy layer, meaning that there's a lot of color, there's water movement happening. Because I'm going to be using some sprinkling of plain salt on the top of there, just a table salt is what you would use. And the table salt is going to create these beautiful little star-like patterns in the background and really do resemble kind of a frosty, winter, snowy night. For the salt technique, you definitely need to have your paper wet, your colors really wet before you add your salt. Once you have your area ready to receive the salt, you're going to just sprinkle some in your hand, pick up a pinch, and then rub it between your thumb and your forefinger and kind of make more of a granulated sprinkle look to it. Little speckles of the salt will look a lot more distinct in those little frosty areas than just big globs of it. So you're looking for more of a sprinkling of the salt. Now you need to let that all dry, do it naturally. Your colors will be a lot more vibrant and you tend to get a better look if you let your paper just naturally dry. Once it's all dry, then you'll be able to just brush it off easily in the salt. It will come off very easily and then you'll see what you have. But you won't know until the very end. Here you can see me adding a little bit more deeper shadows into the red area. I definitely want to have some underneath of that one fabric going over the other, some on the edges of each of the area of the scarf, and a little bit around the areas for the earmuffs. And by adding those little shadows, it's going to look more contour. Now my little tree is already dried, so I can go ahead and add some color to my baubles. Just choose whatever colors you want. You'll probably need a couple layers, so layer in your color, let it dry, and then add a shadow area to one side of your bulbs, and that's really going to add that extra depth there as well. Having a more all-over lighter color and then adding one area on your bulb as being a shadow. You can always go back in with a white pen of some sort to add in a bright white if you would like to, or even use a little bit of gouache at the end too. This is a good time now to check the color of your tree as well and see if you need to darken any areas. I decided I wanted to add a little bit more punch to that bright green area, and then you can layer in some other colors as well too if you need to brighten any of your greens or add a little bit more shadow. The last area I need to finish is the trunk area, and I just took some burnt sienna, watered it down to about coffee consistency, did the same thing like I did the bulbs on the tree where I did one coat, add a little bit of shadow to one side to give it more of a little contour look. It's just real simple. Add as much detail as you would like. I did forget to mention I did add black coal pieces to the front of my snowman just using the black that was in my set. I basically did kind of a medium shade of the black, let it dry, and then added a darker area to each piece of the coal. I think it was the left-hand side of my coal that I added the shadow. I also went back and checked my red, added any more deep color that I needed to add, and I used the tip of my brush to create a few little darker red stripes. This is just a very subtle detail, but you can see the striping on there as it's drying. And I will be adding some pen work in the end as well to add even a little bit more detail to the scarf and the earmuffs. This is a good time too to check your blue shadows. Make sure you have a darker shadow underneath your scarf. At the base of your scarf where they are hanging down, choose an area where you want one to have a darker shadow. And up above the earmuffs to add a little bit darker blue shadow there as well. And I added just the tiniest bit of blue shadow around the carrot just to make that nose pop just a little bit more. Check your oranges to see how they're drying. Orange is one of those colors that it often takes at least 3 coats to make it pop orange. So check to see how your colors are drying. I gave my piece plenty of time to dry before I began the pen work. I was going to be using micron pens here, and any nib size between the size of 0.1 and 0.3 works great for these small paintings. I love his little curly top by adding those little curls of those whimsical style sticks for his hair. And then that little smile that goes across with those little dots of stones looks perfect for his facial expression. He does have closed eyes this time around, so it's just basically a little line across, swoop it down, and then up and add some eyelashes. And that just gives him a very sweet look. For the tree, I added some additional branches for the section off my colors, and then around the edges, I just do stop and start marks, ziggity zags, back and forth to add that little extra bit of whimsical character to this painting. I use my uni ball pen to add the white sparkles to this painting. I will have lists down inside of my description box for some of the items I used, so if you want to take a look and purchase them yourself, there are links down below that you can easily take a look at what I used. The uni ball pen works great for adding just the right amount of extra sparkle. I kind of treat white at the end as kind of like glitter. A little bit goes a long way. So choose your spots where you want them and just add that little extra sparkle to bring the glow to this painting. I did decide to add a few little white dots inside of my tree, just to add a little bit of twinkles, like there's lights inside of there, and I thought the white pen worked great to be able to add this. Once I had that part done, I gave it a little bit of time to dry because the uni ball pen is more of a wet ink and it takes just a tish bit of time to dry. But I was going to be adding some splitter splatters on the top. I was going to be taking my watered down dark blue colors, added a lot of water into my brush, then hold it over the top and tap it on another paintbrush. And that's just going to create that splitter splatter random look, and it adds some interest to that larger white background. After adding the blue, I decided it needed a little bit of metallic, so I brought out my metallic colors and splitter splattered a little bit of gold. Well, let's take a look at what this looks like in my studio inside of a frame. And here he is looking cute as can be, sitting amongst some of the other items I have created so far for winter and Christmas time ideas. If you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a thumbs up, give me a comment. It really can help my channel grow. If you enjoyed this tutorial, here's a playlist with all sorts of Christmas ideas from gingerbread, snowmen, and Santas, all in one place. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you can come back and join me again, and next time you'll paint right along with me.